Hi, I'm Rick Olson with the Prior Lake Rotary. And today we're going to be talking about thinking about our thinking and how subconscious bias affects what we think, believe, and do. So we're going to talk about our biases and how they relate to our politics, views on health policy, and even on racism. And I may raise some questions and ideas, or more questions and ideas for you to think about than give many answers. One of the things we have is our Rotary four-way test. And the first one is it the truth? And the fact is that there are many Americans today that think they know the truth, but really don't. And so we'll talk about why some of that may be. Socrates says, to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. So maybe this will spur each of us to think a little bit more about our thinking. We are who we are, and what we think, believe, and do, primarily due to our past experiences. Some of these experiences we are consciously aware of. Others we absorb unconsciously from our environment. From these experiences, we develop a number of biases, many of which we are not even aware of. Now, because some biases are observed in many people from very different backgrounds, some theorists also believe that some of the biases that psychologists have proven to exist, that they may be genetic, derived from our evolutionary background. For example, Jonathan Haidt argues that humans have 6 moral foundations. He believes some of those are actually passed down through evolutionary means. But anyway, today we're really going to be talking about the biases that are shown in the website called yourbias.is. It's a very good website. Now, one of the first things that we need to talk about is confirmation bias, because we favor things that confirm our existing beliefs. We are primed to see and agree with ideas that fit our preconceptions. And in fact, we seek out that information. And we are primed to ignore and dismiss information that conflicts with them. Now, the little schematic on the bottom says that we have a theory, and then we find evidence to support it. And that's confirmation bias. Now, here's 2 scientists. One says, did you read my paper on confirmation bias? The other one says, yes, but it only proved what I already knew. Yeah. Confirmation bias in action. Well, let's look at our news sources and how that fits into the idea of confirmation bias. Republicans view and place trust in one source, Fox News, far more than any other. While Democrats or more liberal people tend to look at other news sources, CNN, NBC News, and so forth. And Republicans tend to rely on Fox News far more for political news. As you can see, the graphs, Fox News is 60% is the source of news for Republicans, and Democrats, again, are looking at different sources. So they have what really has turned out to be 2 alternate realities. So all this is made worse with Facebook and Twitter, because the algorithms they use feed back other people's posts similar to ones that we've liked. The result is that we get posts that are close to our thinking and reinforces our preconceived ideas. Posts that are dissimilar to what we liked are not fed to us. So it's like living in a bubble or in an echo chamber. This has really put confirmation bias on steroids. Now, to help counteract the influence of confirmation bias, we ought to presume ourselves wrong until proven right. We need to think of our ideas and beliefs as software we're actively trying to find problems with, rather than things to be defended. This is very similar to the scientific method, where a scientist comes up with a theory and then tries to disprove that theory. And if he can't disprove it, then he has more confidence that that theory just might be right. Richard Feynman says the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. So this is another way of talking about this is to practice detachment. That is, seek to know what's right rather than who's right. That is, we're not be wedded to our preconceived ideas or beliefs. We just really don't need to be attached to those. We can let them go. This is one of the virtues that George Wickstrom from Faribault often talks about. Now, another bias that you may have witnessed in the last 4 or 5 years is the more you know, the less confident you're likely to be. It's easy to be overconfident. We have only a simple idea of how things are. So don't give much credence to lay people who appear confident but have only superficial knowledge. However, because experts know just how much they don't know, they tend to underestimate their ability. So try not to mistake the cautiousness of experts as a lack of understanding. Now, if you know just a little and you're in blissful ignorance, you've got high confidence that you know what you're talking about. Then as you learn a little more, you're getting less and less and less confident until you gain a great deal of expertise. Then you become more confident again. But you may remember the former guy who really was confident that he knew more about everything than anybody else. Another bias is called the curse of knowledge. Once we understand something, we presume it is obvious to everyone. Bertrand Russell says, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves, yet wiser people so full of doubts. I'm sure we've all remembered the old saying, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. The result is that people with superficial knowledge think they are informed. So they may think people who don't agree with them must simply be misinformed or duped. And we get right down to it. When you think about watching the news, how little do we really know and then become very confident of what the little we do know? Well, another bias is the halo effect. Because how much we like someone or how attractive they are, it influences our judgments of them. So if we want to be objective, we need to consciously control for these irrelevant influences. Another bias is groupthink. We let the social dynamics of a group situation override our best outcomes. This then can be uncomfortable and dangerous to one's social standing. And so often the most confident or first voice will determine group decisions. Now, this is something that I've seen in Rotary decision making. Because of Dunning-Kruger effect, the most confident voices are also often the most ignorant. Now, another belief is the belief bias. If a conclusion supports our existing beliefs, we'll rationalize anything that supports it. It's difficult for us to set aside our existing beliefs to consider the true merits of an argument. In practice, this means that our ideas become impervious to criticism and are perpetually reinforced. Now, to combat this idea is to use what Stephen Covey believes is that seek first to understand before seeking to be understood. Okay, now a real uncomfortable conversation for many of us is racism in America. We are unaware of much of our environment, but our subconscious records it all. And our implicit bias versus people different from us shows itself often without our thinking. So the point I really want to make is being racially biased is not about being a good person or not. We have in-group bias. We unfairly favor those who belong to our group. We presume that we're fair and impartial. But the truth is that we automatically favor those who are most like us or belong to our groups. Now, there's a big difference between racial bias and prejudice versus discrimination, because there's that gap between stimulus and response. In that split second between stimulus and response, we have an opportunity to choose a response that is most likely to achieve our objective. Now, we may see a black person with hair that we're not familiar with and like, and we may have a negative reaction. But we can choose not to be discriminatory. We have choice. Now, we also have what's called self-serving bias, because we believe our failures are due to external factors, yet we're responsible for our own successes. Now, many of us enjoy unearned privileges, luck, and advantages that others do not. It's easy to tell ourselves that we deserve these things, while blaming circumstance when things don't go our way. Now, President Obama got himself in a little bit of hot water when he said, "You didn't build this." What he was really referring to was that whether we like to admit it or not, many of us have had these advantages that many blacks have not. And it's been the whole system or the whole environment that's really been a major part of our successes. Now, we are all products of our environment and experiences. We can be racially biased without any fault of our own. So someone who is obviously racist is not necessarily a bad person. But I need to exercise a little bit of judgment here. And I say, but one who becomes aware of racism and remains discriminatory may not be blameless. Socrates says an unexamined life is not worth living. Well, I don't know that I go that far, but I do believe you are not to blame for what you believe, but you are responsible for what you become. Let's talk a little bit about health policy and COVID and with our lockdowns and masks and vaccines and how biases play into this. There is a bias called reactance, because you'd rather do the opposite of what someone is trying to make you do. So people resist masks and mandates and so forth. And there's also the backfire effect. When some aspect of our core beliefs is challenged, it can cause us to believe even more strongly. We can experience being wrong about some ideas as an attack upon our very selves or our tribal identity. Now, a new field of study in recent years is behavioral economics. And one of the findings is that we have loss aversion. It's an observation that we experience losses more severely than equivalent gains. Now, in one psychological study, people are given a choice. One choice is to either have a chance to win $10 or lose $10, 50-50 chance. Second is to get a sure $5. More often than not, people will choose the sure $5 because they fear losing that $10 more than they like winning the $10. They don't like to lose. So what plays into this is that another bias called declinism. We remember the past as better than it was and expect the future to be worse than it will likely be. So what we have is fear of losing, quote, America as we know it. Now, when we think about it, what do people around the world like to eat? Or what are they familiar with? What is one of your favorite foods? Something your mother cooked or something you ate as a kid? The point is, we like what we are familiar with, and we don't want to lose it. There's also the sunk cost fallacy to think about, because we irrationally cling to things that have already cost us something. So when we've invested our time, money, or emotion into something, it hurts us to let it go. So America as we know it, the things that we knew and grew up with, we sort of like to hang on to those. So we've talked a lot about what causes polarization, but let's look at the results. In surveys that have been done of Republicans, Democrats, with the question of Republicans were asked, Democrats are very unfavorable. From 1994, the percentage of that Republicans asked that has gone up to 91% who agree with that. Democrats asked the opposite. Republicans are very unfavorable. That too has increased over the years. So we have a divided America. Well, this is not good. But instead of finishing on a low note, let's talk about what we can do about it. We can let ourselves grow. Now, LET, those are short for learn, experiences, and travel. Because in addition to critically examining what we believe to eliminate confirmation bias, like we've talked about before, we can continue to learn from a wide variety of reputable sources. We can seek new experiences and travel to open yourselves up to new perspectives. Now we'll open that up for questions.